Good evening, everybody, and I'd like to welcome you to our first Autumn Let's Talk Organics webinar. And with the Organic Farming Scheme open presently for new entrants to the Organic Farming Scheme, our focus this evening is looking at tree farmers who have recently converted to organics. And before we start, I'll introduce you to those tree farmers. First, we have John O'Hanlon, who is farming in just outside Ballymahon in County Longford. Himself and his wife Stephanie are dry stock farmers, and they have a grassland farm with approximately 30 suckler herd, with all animals being brought to stores. Then secondly, we're travelling over to the east coast to Angus Woods, and Angus, who is just located outside Wicklow Town, has just started organic conversion this year, and he has a suckler herd, and he also has a sheep flock, and he's also growing organic cereals this year for the first time. Then we're moving down to County Waterford to Kilmacthomas, and we have John and Ivan Kiersey, and we're joined by Ivan this evening, and they are just started the process of converting into an organic dairy farm. So those are our three guests for this evening. I'm going to let them take their breaths for a couple of minutes, and what we're going to do, rather than making presentations, we're going to show you a video by ways of introducing John, Angus and Ivan to you, and we're going to hear from them standing out on their farmyards, why and what they're doing in relation to their conversion to organics.
My name is John O'Hanlon. I'm farming here outside Ballymahon in Longford. I'm about to start my third year in organics, so I've been in 2 years. I'm running a suckler to store system. I was working a lot off farm. Time was a major problem for me, so I had to scale back in terms of numbers. So I wanted something that was meaningful, hopefully bring an economic return and provide a bit of a challenge as well. So I'm staying at the suckler cows, and so far it has worked out quite well in terms of calving. And I have a very simple system. It has to be a balancing act between being able to get the off-farm jobs done, the on-farm jobs done, and do as good a job as I can on the organics. I have the straw blower here beside me, which was a major help in getting started. Labour saving all the way, proper lighting, just safety being a big issue as well, because you're trying to do work under pressure and get in and get out. It's been certainly challenging. Learned a lot over the last couple of years, absolutely. We've put in a bit of red clover this year. We put in white clover last year. I'm hoping to maybe do a little multi-species sward in the year that's coming. Learning all the time. The farm need lots of investment. It's no gold mine, as we all know, but enjoying it. The first major change was housing. I didn't go building new housing, but I had to do a little bit of reconstruction, for want of a better term. I took out slats and replaced slabs, and I did that through TAMS, which we're currently trying to process the last of the TAMS applications and submissions at the minute. We also went for red clover to try and reduce, well, obviously to get our red clover silage, as many cuts as we can per year, and reduce the I suppose the need and the cost of meal, which is a major problem when you start to feed. And for soil fertility, this is a farm that was an out farm to the main family farm years back. It didn't get a whole lot of love. It was well run down. It's a farm that needs lots of work. But we have done the soil sampling. We've spread lime. We're working steadily on it. We put in a farm roadway this year as well through softish ground, because it's heavy clay soil here as well. It's a challenge to farm in this ground. But they were the main changes so far.
Welcome to Wicklow. My name is Angus Woods. I'm a suckler, beef, sheep and tillage farmer here. Operating 2/3 of the land that I'm farming is rented land and 1/3 is my own. I converted into the organic scheme on the 1st of January this year, so I'm a new entrant in my first year. I suppose a lot of people are wondering why I went into the organic scheme. There's a multitude of reasons for that. It's not a straightforward answer. Where we live here in Wicklow, it's very hard to get labour. It's very hard to get someone to help you out, or if you wanted to go for a weekend or a week away, hard to get someone to come in, feed cattle and look after sheep and stock and whatever. So pushing numbers higher isn't an option. And I suppose second of all, when I sat down and I did the numbers on the organic scheme, and what it meant to me. Okay, there's changes I needed to make to my farm system, but really what matters to me is my bottom line. And when I sat down and started doing the maths on it, it became appealing to me. So I suppose I'm coming up to the end of my first year. We've had a first full grazing season. We're into the winter housing period. And I've spent the first year kind of bedding into it. So I'm looking forward to getting into year 2 on it. The one thing that always concerns a lot of conventional farmers around going organic is the impact on your stocking rates and your stock numbers. That wasn't so much of an issue for me because land became available to me to lease, which was in continuous tillage. And what I did was I put it into a red clover mix. So I'm using that for my silage ground, which is in effect, it's increasing my grazing area, or my area for my cattle and sheep. So it didn't have an absolute dramatic effect. But one area where I have had to make a significant change is in this shed here. This was a 100% slatted out beef finishing unit. The slats, I've lifted the slats and I've replaced them with solid concrete slabs. And now the cows are in this shed and they're bedded on straw. It's a big decision to make. Take out slats, put back in slabs. But because I have the tillage enterprise on my farm, straw isn't a concern for me. And to be honest, I'm actually quite happy to have more dung available than slurry, because a lot of my farm is quite hilly and steep, and slurry isn't an option on some of the fields, whereas dung is. It's a much more stable product. I can head up with my dung spreader and work away in relative safety on it. So yeah, no, it's not all, it's not all either positive or negative. There's challenges in it both ways. But then again, conventional farming isn't a bed of roses. If we were to pick up the media and listen to farmers on a regular basis, sure, there's lots of issues and problems that have to be dealt with. The organic switch for me, having done a lot of research in it, was the right move for my farm.
The main driver of going organics here was clover. And I remember being in Salhead maybe around 2000. And James Humphreys was starting his work there, and I was just astounded that clover could respond so well with fireless nitrogen. So I joined a clover group, which was based in Limerick, and it sort of, I think, around maybe for a year or two, fizzled out. There wasn't enough momentum behind it. So, but I kept on with the clover, and we would put in 4 pounds of clover with all of our grass seeds going forward, putting extra clover all the time. And we were still on high end, like half a ton of nitrogen per acre. And but then James Humphreys started the clover group maybe 4 years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago. And there's real momentum in Salhead now to go to zero N. We're in our 3rd year now. Second, 3rd year?
Third.
No chemical N. We have a trading shoe, and that's been absolutely vital. But things like, where we would have had heavy covers going into winter, and we saw clover crops just eliminated if they weren't grazed in spring. And we often got springs where you couldn't graze it properly, so it's been a real up and down sort of situation. But there's far more, if you like, input by the clover group, and the work in Salhead is really showing up how to manage clover properly. There's a real demand out there to get more farmers into organic, and because of our clover base, I'd say we're in a position to try it anyway.
We're on 300 acres here, and we're milking 140 cows with followers and a bit of a beef enterprise too. So we were up at about 196 on the nitrate, so we were in derogation level, so we had to cut our stock by about 15% to get down under for organics. But hopefully it will improve work-life balance in terms of maybe getting a little bit more out of a little bit less on the farm. So yeah, it's some of the beef stock have just been moved on a bit earlier to get under the 170.
And you were at 196 with no nitrogen.
With no nitrogen, yeah,
Prior to
exactly,
planting organic,
yeah,
so
yeah, and had never had any issue growing enough grass or having enough silage in the pits. So that gave us the confidence that we could do, that we definitely could do it at a lower stocking rate.
Okay, everybody, thank you very much. I think we've seen 3 very interesting stories, but actually when you think about, even though we're talking about people in different locations and different enterprises, there's actually some common threads between your comments throughout the videos. What I'll do is, which I forgot to ask, is put some questions. Can you put them into your chat function there? And while you're doing that, maybe I'll start myself by asking each of our participants here tonight a question, and I'll start. You were first in the video, John, so you're first for the question. And I suppose maybe something that you said in it, and as an organic advisor, we talk a lot about clover in organics, and you have actually gone and sown red clover this year for the first time. Maybe just give an overview to viewers in relation to how you established that and what are you going to use it for, what your plans for this winter for using it.
Okay, but I suppose establishment wise, I put a lot of farmyard manure on that field before we ploughed. That was the first thing. So I got the fertility up as high as I could initially. We had soil sampled as well, so it was 5 acres. It needed 9 tons of lime, which we got out as well as soon as it was ploughed. So we got it. It went in the 10th of May. So I had a bit of grazing there in the spring out of it as well, which was a major help. I know it's only a small thing, but that was a big help in the spring that we had just gone past. I was very tight for grass because, like Angus there, I had put in slabs for slats, and approval was late and slow coming through the department at the time. So cattle were out a bit longer. So my farm was well grazed heading into the winter, which meant with the late spring, I was under pressure. So I ended up having to graze that ground after I put on the farmyard manure. But anyway, it worked out a treat. It was nice and low. We ploughed it. It got a good turn on it. It got 3 power harrows and a sowing. We took our first cut off the 31st of July, which was, I think we ended up with 5 bales to the acre on the first cut. 6 weeks and a day later, we cut the second cut, and I ended up with 5.8 bales on it. It just got slurry in the meantime. As soon as we cut, basically, we went for slurry. In terms of establishment, weather was tricky, and I learned one very valuable lesson here. If you drive or tramp on red clover ground when it's anyway wet, it will kill the clover under the tires. This is very important. And the grass gets re-established, but the clover doesn't. You need to mind this like a baby. However, once it got up and going, it grew incredibly fast. We had a lovely even spread. I put a little bit extra seed per acre when I was doing it. It would have supposedly have taken a little over 5 bags. I went and put on 6 bags, put every bit of it on it. It definitely paid off. And in terms of what was referred to there in one of the videos as well, Enda came back out to me. My Teagasc advisor just reckoned there was too much cover on it there at the end of the year. I had grazed it, but with the late growth this year, we actually grazed it again to stop that canopy, and it's nice now. We don't have a canopy of grass over the clover, so I'm very happy with it so far. But I am minding it very carefully.
Yeah. Okay. And then that's going to be fed then this winter, John. What animals are you going to feed that to?
We're targeting that because with the, I suppose, the meal that's available to us locally here for organics will be over 700 a ton. So you're going to feed very little of that. I did have to feed a certain amount of it to keep in line with the SCEP or the beef welfare schemes, the suckler schemes there. So meal had to be fed as one of the commitments there for that. So that's fine. It gets them through weaning, which actually suits me too, because I'm weaning them in small batches from a health point of view. When I have a bundle of them together, then I can start feeding it out. Because I don't want to waste half bales, or I don't want to be giving it to cows. It's a replacement for meal. Effectively, this is what it says in the tin. So this is what we hope to work on over the winter. So I hopefully have enough just to feed the weanlings and give them a good push on. So we've weighed them prior to, as part of the suckler scheme there as well, before they went in, and we'll weigh them coming out, and we'll see how it works.
Absolutely, that'll be proof in the pudding, will be by the weight, definitely. Okay, on to now John and Ivan Kiersey, and we have Ivan. And Ivan, what struck me when your dad was talking is that you have clover since 2000, so 24 years, a quarter of a century with putting in white clover. And I suppose a question I'd like to ask you would be, how are you maintaining very good levels? Because you're in an organic dairy situation now, maintaining levels of white clover in those swards.
Yeah, well, as you said, we've had it now for nearly a quarter of a century, so I can't take too much credit for those early days of Dad putting it in. But yeah, like some of those fields, even that would have been reseeded in the early 2000s, haven't been reseeded since, and have some of the strongest white clover swords going, and we'd be slow to actually go and reseed a field that's still performing so well, because it can be a hard to crop to establish. So when you have it going well, it definitely doesn't make sense in our eyes to reseed it. But the key performance, the key thing to keep it going is really the management in terms of pre-grazing yields, making sure it's not grazed or really heavy cuts of silage taken from it. We try and target a pre-grazing yield of 1,300. So that's what we're getting in it. And also, as Dad said in the video too, that it wouldn't be left with too heavy a crop going to over the winter, because if you block out that light, you'll find that, or potentially find that all that clover could be gone the next spring, and you might have to go in and reseed that because it can take. We've done experiments where we wait for it to come back, and it does, but it can be slow. So if you're on a high stocked system, you might be able to take that risk of waiting for it to come back. But the other thing then would be poaching is really detrimental to white clover, and we had experience with that winter, particularly this spring, where we had lots of grass but such difficult underfoot conditions, and unfortunately damage was done. And there are some of our fields now that we'll have to go and stitch. We did do some stitching towards the end of the summer this year, but we'll probably have to do a bit more now in the spring.
Okay, and how are you feeding it nutrient wise? What way are you feeding it to keep the levels as well as the management?
It's slurry is slurry and dung is really where it's getting it.
Okay, and maybe just to add, like, that's the clover, the grassland area. Maybe, I suppose you are, like, you had John there talking that he's using his red clover and all the rest to minimize his feed bill. But in an organic dairy situation, you are going to have to feed in the milking parlour to keep the milk in those jars. So what is your feeding regime for your winter months in the parlour?
Yeah, so well, since we converted now our feed, we've been feeding a non-GMO dairy ration. So our cows are still on, like they would have been before, feed to yield, and they get about 850 to 900 kilos a year with that. But we would hope to, as we go towards full organic, to grow red clover to maybe reduce some of that bought in inputs, because it does get quite expensive under organics.
Okay. Maybe Joe, Angus, we've lost Angus there for a few minutes. Maybe there's a lot of questions coming in there. Maybe you might field some of the questions for Joe.
Yeah, John O'Hanlon, I might fire a few of these to you, because there's a good few on the red clover side of it. First one here, where red clover is damaged in the wheel tracks, is there any way to oversow to replenish the red clover? Have you ever tried anything like that, John?
Not yet, but I hopefully be able to answer that question next spring, because there's one thing myself and Enda were looking at, and you could look out into the field and I can see the tram lines. And that wasn't an overly wet evening. I remember I was heading off to a meeting and I left the contractor there. Had it been there, probably would have stopped him, but it came wet. So the lesson there, is prevention being better than cure. But I'd say even by hand, possibly after the first cut is taken off it, when from a germination and from a warmth point of view, maybe in May, June, some of the cuts during the year, it might be suitable to even just hand out, literally out of a bag of seed onto those tram lines. Now you'd have to get your derogation and your proper seed as well. So just to be careful of that, to stay within the ditches on the organics. And that in itself might even work with slurry. But just you'll have far less slurry when you go with your dung, and especially when you're coming out of year 1 into year 2 into year 3. you don't have the volumes of slurry because 50% of your accommodation is now farmyard manure. So that's another thing you need to mind and stretch.
You don't as in place of it. Just another question on the red clover there about grazing it with sheep. I know you don't have sheep, but have you grazed it or?
Yes, we give it light grazing after the second cut was taken off it there we cut on, it was in September, 12th of September. It did grow back. We had a late growth this year, so there was the canopy that Ivan was referring to there was starting to appear. So yes, we did graze it. It wasn't going to be enough to take another cut of bales, but we grazed it. We grazed it with light store cattle and a few weanlings. And as soon as, again, Endo Hart, my Teagasc advisor, came out there that time and just felt we were getting a little tight in terms of doing damage to the nodes. You don't, no more than cutting it too low, you can't graze it too low. So, you know, just you err on the little bit on the safe side and whip them off.
Ivan, there's a question here for you on the mineral supplementation, and it's asking what do you supplement the cattle with, both pre and post calving? You might take that one.
Well, easy answer is none. And that wasn't even, that's not just since we went organic, that's something we have, we stopped using about 5 years ago, the pre-calver. Again, trying to focus on high quality silage and the animals actually getting the minerals from the silage, and we've seen virtually no difference in retained cleanings or get cows getting milk fever in the spring. So we don't see any reason to go back to it, to be honest.
Good, interesting. And just on that veterinary side of things, what's your approach to dosing on that?
Dosing. Yeah, well, we're a closed herd, so our herd health status would be quite high, but vaccinations, we only vaccinate the weanlings for blackleg. Nothing else gets vaccinations, and then dosing is only in the weanlings as well.
Okay. No cows ever see those. Okay. John, what's your approach to the veterinary side of things?
Yeah, well, it's eventually a closed herd, but I used to buy in quite a bit over the years, and I ended up with quite a plethora of different conditions. We are in a high molybdenum area, so I do have to use minerals. I use Co-Secure twice a year on the cows. I find it very good. There's no retained cleanings or the scour situation. All of that has improved. I do rely on vaccines, though. That'd be opposite to Ivan. We had issues with RSV and some of the respiratory conditions with the weaning, so I will have those done in advance of weaning and an annual booster to what else is left on the farm, and it works well. But I do work on prevention rather than cure. Very little sickness, very little antibiotic use. The longer we stay with a closed herd, probably the better the herd health status would be. But with the issues with copper around the molybdenum, we do have to give supplement in with bolus. That's what we're doing. But I've stopped using the granulated pre-carver minerals. I don't need to anymore. The bolus is working quite well.
Yeah. Ivan, there's one here for you. With a clover sward, is there an issue with early spring grass, and do you modify your calving date as a result of this?
I suppose we haven't again modified our calving date because it's just the way it's been. But we'd start calving probably strongest around the 1st of February, but our 6-week calving rate might only be 60 to 70%. It's not an extremely high 6-week calving rate, so the demand for spring grass might be a small bit lower than it would be on a really intensive 6-week calving date. But we always find that we do have enough grass, obviously supplemented with a bit of silage at the start, but there is enough grass there for cows to be turned out as early as in January we'd have turned out.
I suppose the perception would be there that in an organic dairy setting that you've no nitrogen and you can't spread nitrogen, but in effect you can through the slurry. And in your case, I know you're big fans of the dribble bar or the trailing shoe. You might just explain what way do you work that in the spring?
Yeah, so in the springtime we'd again be focused. We do milk all year round, so it's there is constantly a herd there looking for grass whenever it's available. So if we have grass and ground conditions suit in early January, we're out, and albeit it's a small herd at that stage, so that helps. But there, They're zipping around the farm, getting some of those covers grazed off, and so are the wheelings. So as soon as again the slurry opening date has come, we'll get out with the trailing shoe, and we just find that the response to the grass that's being grazed to that slurry is phenomenal. Yeah, and it really pushes on. Then as soon as the growth rates actually pick up around, it really kicks on from that early application.
Thanks, Elaine. I might hand back to you with Angus back in.
Angus, you're back.
Yeah.
So maybe look, as I was saying, I asked you a very long, convoluted question, but really what I want to know is what are your plans post conversion? Because you've done a lot of planning and thinking pre, and you're halfway through your conversion. So where is it going to take you after conversion?
Yeah, well, I suppose, look, as a full-time farmer, making a profit from my farm is absolutely key, and the support's available through the organic scheme. That's just one element of it. You're asking me what I intend to do as we move forward through it. I still intend producing as much as I can off the farm. Labor is my big concern. How much can I get out of my own single labor unit and still have somewhat of a life at the end of it as well too. So I find myself, particularly this autumn, walking the farm, planning my rotation for next springtime, which fields am I going to reseed, where am I going to get my silage covers from, and is that part of my reseeding program? And what I have noticed is I have been using multi-species for the last couple of years. It's been performing well on my farm because it's quite a dry farm. It's been performing, it's probably, even with no nitrogen, it has been outperforming fields that I was spreading nitrogen on before I joined the scheme. And those fields this year without the chemical nitrogen on have struggled. So they're going to be targeted first thing this spring for a reseeding program. And as I say, some of that reseeding program might take in arable silage, or probably a little bit more red clover, which I've also have in place on the farm as well too. But I do intend to farm it, and farm it as well and as hard and as intelligently as I can. It's not the primary goal is not to be continually focusing on numbers, as in how many cattle have I got, how many cows have I got, how many sheep have I got. The main goal is to focus on the profit of the business, and what am I getting out of it for the amount of time and effort that I'm putting into it. Streamlining what I have. I'm lucky enough in terms of have a balance. I have the suckler herd finishing the animals, I have the sheep, and I have the tillage. So, I can move a little bit back and forward between those systems depending on which is working well. But I'm definitely on the tillage end of things. I'm looking down I'm hoping to avail of contracts for the likes of Flavins, organic oats, and move into kind of a higher value, higher margin cropping system as well.
Angus, you mentioned the profitability there, and I know I heard you last week blowing the Biofarm conference in Adair, and you mentioned in your video there that you did a few sums in the back of the envelope, and I know in the Biofarm conference you went into, you gave a nice description as to how you actually did those sums. You might just give us a run through of what were the key figures you looked at when you were evaluating the financial feasibility of it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like farming, you need to keep it simple. You can overcomplicate these things too much. What I started with was I looked at the number of hectares I have, and I looked at how much the organic payment would bring into me. So that was my first figure. And beside that figure, I put down how much money I was spending each year on fertilizer, chemical fertilizer. And I added the two figures together. So organic payment plus fertilizer payment, added the two together. And I said to myself, how many lambs do I need to produce? Net margin on each lamb. How many lambs do I need to produce to give me back that financial return. And when you do that, it comes into a huge number, and you have to look at it and you say, how could I do that? How could I produce all those lambs or weanlings for that will equal that, guaranteed equal that sum? And then another factor, then obviously when you get the economic angle right in your head, then you start thinking, well, you know, normally I would be lambing down 550 ewes, maybe closer to 600 some years. And I was thinking to myself, like, if it snowed, which it has done around lambing time, if it's snowing around lambing time, would I be any worse off if I had 100 ewes less at lambing time? A lot more space in the shed, a lot more flexibility around turnout. So again, it comes back down to the economics plus the labor advantage of what it brings to me. But I think as too often as farmers, we focus on how many cows have we got, how many sheep have we got. If we're talking tillage, we're talking about, you know, how many, you'd always hear farmers saying, how did it yield for you? How many tons to the acre did you get? Very, very rarely will you read in the commentary or will you hear farmers saying, how much per acre did they make net profit? You'll almost never hear that. But ultimately, that's what it comes down to. How much per acre or per hectare can we make for ourselves net profit? And that to me is absolutely key.
Thank you. John O'Hanlon, you're coming to the end of year 2. So you from the 1st of January, you'll be fully converted organic farmer. You'll have your 2 year. And there's a question here just around the markets and the beef prices. I know 12 months ago, the organic beef prices was €1 ahead of conventional, but that gap has closed of late. Is there something that worries you, or what way would you set up your business to deal with that?
Yeah, I suppose the more than Angus there, when I was getting into this initially and looking at figures, I kind of worked out mostly on conventional beef price because that was more or less the reality of it. Everything over and above that would be a bonus. I think if you were going to build a bridge hoping to reach the other side, that it'll be built when you get there, it's a kind of a little bit dangerous. So I suppose obviously I'm just coming to the first of those animals now. I've had a little bit of a kibosh in that I got restricted with TB. I'm hoping that's going to be a temporary measure, but it is a reality that's out there maybe on a lot of farms as well around the country. So I'm toying with the idea now of turning it into I'm at the minute in a store system, and should I go the whole way now and head to a finishing system? And especially if I get my clover swarts established and can reduce the need for meal, improve the grazing during the summer, improve the red clover silage or have enough of it for stores and for finishing in the winter. It's an option I'm seriously considering at the minute. I would go for a heavy carcass Angus bull to just, I suppose, with the farm I have, it isn't or has never been a finishing farm, so that would be a test. But all the time with an eye of keeping the cost down, try and get whatever margin is there. Absolutely, we have very little control over the price that's going to be there for the organic beef. There's a lot of money being put into marketing it, and hopefully as if the European economy improves a little bit more as well, and things start to settle down politically, it just might improve that market. But I think you'd want to be doing your sums on conventional price. I wouldn't say I'm worried. I'd be concerned. I'll keep it simple. I'll keep my costs down, and I probably will go for a finishing system.
Ivan, just there's a few questions coming in there on housing, and I know that Angus and John covered the housing in their videos, but had you much changes to do to housing in terms of conversion from a dairy setup?
Not well. We're non-simultaneous, so we still actually don't have to do any for right now. But for when we're converted, we're going to do a cubicle and straw bedding kind of hybrid. That's the way a lot of our shed we at the moment use predominantly cubicles, but we have areas that that can be converted easily to straw bedding. So they'll be used for the dairy herd. It'll be kind of hybrid between the two of them. And then for our young stock, we have our kind of beef or finishing unit is fully slatted. So the plan there is to take up the back row of slats on each side of the house and change that to slabs. So that's the big change on that part of the farm. But we do hope that, you know, having to get in straw will actually be a good thing in terms of nutrients coming in the gate, and that's all necessary part of going forward with organics as well.
And in terms of your cubicles,
cubicles, yeah, 2.6. They'll meet the minimum size. They won't be the 3x3s, but through
bedded, you have a mat and you bed them.
Yes, yeah, bed them with strong sawdust and lime mix.
Perfect. And just as regards what I've been talking about there, the cost of Angus maybe, and you and then John, the two of you did the same. You replaced slats with slabs. Was it a big cost item, and was there grant aid to be got, or what way did you work it? Maybe Angus, you can take that.
Yeah, it is. There's a TAMS grant there available, 60% grant. Obviously it's a fixed item as well too, so you can claim the VAT back on it. But there is still a cost involved in it, and obviously it depends on how big the shed is. From my own perspective, the dung is very beneficial because I can easily get up around a hill with half loads, and whereas slurry is a liquid slushing around in a tanker, and it's much more difficult to manage on some of the steeper ground. So the dung is a much more stable. But I also do have the opportunity, because I still have the tanks underneath, so I do have the opportunity to import slurry over the winter period if I have a neighbour who's in difficulty or whatever. So we, you know, it's not completely lost, and there will always be effluent runoff from the silage pits and that, which will go into the tanks as well too. So there'll be a combination of dung and slurry, but because I have the tillage operation, straw isn't an issue, and like Ivan said, I actually see it as a real benefit to bring in more straw into the system anyway, because it is a nutrient that we're applying to the farm. Yeah, and it is just even in my first year, the simple fact that you don't have the reliance, or you don't have the opportunity to run down to the co-op and buy a couple of ton of fertilizer, bring it back, it completely changes your mindset around slurry usage and dung usage. It becomes much more in your mind. It becomes a much more of a valuable asset than a problem, which a lot of farmers would view slurry and dung kind of as a problem. Oh God, I have to spread it before the end of the closing period and get rid of it, kind of thing, you know. In an organic system, you really do value it, and you see it as a highly valuable nutrient. It is like money in the bank, having a full tank of slurry there, and it's how you choose to use it, and you will use it throughout the year. You'll never leave it stored up towards the end.
Thank you. And I'll throw another one at you there. You mentioned the tillage side of things, Angus, and someone has asked a question here. Did everybody convert to full farm, or did anybody do partial? And I think John and Ivan are both full conversion, but you did partial conversion. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I have 2/3 of my farm is leased land, all on long-term leases, and I had a 60-acre block which is in continuous tillage. I didn't put that into it. Really just for the reason that I felt that I had in my first year, 2 years, I had enough to learn and to focus on in terms of getting the beef and the sheep aspect and my grazing platform, get all that correct without embarking on 100 acres of organic tillage. I have just over 40 acres of organic tillage on the home place, on the home farm. But I decided to leave that 60 out because I just felt I had enough learning to do in year 1 and year 2 probably. But my intention would be to incorporate that into the farm as well too, but just not all at once.
Okay.
And actually, it is a point, certainly for tillage farmers. You know, tillage farmers don't have to put the whole farm in. you can apply. Well, all farmers don't have to put the whole farm, but you can, you can grow it, dare I say, organically. You can grow the number of hectares and number of acres in the scheme. You don't have to launch headlong into it. And around me here, there's a couple of really top class tillage farmers have been growing their organic tillage side every year for the last number of years. They've been adding another couple of fields each year. And so, it can be a case of, feeding their way into it.
Thank you, Angus. John, there's a question in here about straw. Have you any issues? You're the furthest west. You're the furthest away from the straw, I'd say, of our three panelists. Any trouble getting straw this year?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, it's gas. It's funny. It was a nightmare, nothing short of it. Straw is not readily available down this neck of the woods, and it is expensive. It was very difficult last year, a little bit easier this year. What I did do is I sourced locally rushy hay, baled rushes effectively. I was able to buy it last year and this year at €18 a bale versus €40 a bale for a 4x4 for straw. The straw blower is an incredible machine. I use it both at a slow setting to feed out the silage, and it chops up the bales and feeds it out. And I use it at the fast setting for bedding, and you can literally throw anything into it, from straw, square bales, rushy hay, bad hay, whatever it is. You just throw on the dust mask. You buy it as cheap as you can get it. Last winter, I even got 36 bales of Callow's hay from the Shannon that was 6 years old. You won't have seen that stuff. It was all reeds but it was just fantastic for bedding, and it went out. And just to take it a step further, I put lots of stuff under them, lots of it. And but I did run into an awful problem last winter and into the springtime with storage. When you have all of this stuff, you have to go with it. You're bedding the whole time. The cattle start to go up in the ear. I had a Dunstead, which was ample storage for the year normally in conventional farming, very quickly became full. Ground conditions were wet. So that was another reason why I got out the dung as early as I could for the red clover silage, because I needed someplace to go with it. But this year, in order to prepare for this winter, I had an old silage pit, and I went back about a third of the way down. I cut a channel to collect the effluent. Didn't build any walls. I just cut a channel across the middle, a collection point, and then piped a pipe into an existing slurry tank. That left me, I was able to take out the dung out of the sheds, turn it, try to kind of semi-compost it to mix it, and lots of room because I'm out on the pit. And I'm hoping this year I've been taking the bales off the pit from that side. So I will feed that section of the pit first to leave this section of the pit that I need for the manure empty, and to maximize the use of that. But getting straw and getting bedding material, I could blow my whole organics payment on straw if I didn't watch what I was doing. And I think that's a very important lesson. Definitely.
A big market for rushes, yeah.
Well, I'm in the land of rushes. It's not too hard, not too hard to get them around here.
You mentioned the straw chopper there, that was bought under TAMS as well, was it?
It was bought under TAMS, and as Angus said, there's a 60% grant for the straw chopper. I'm awaiting payment on it at the minute. Yeah, you just go through the motions of it in TAMS, but certainly it's a great help. It's too much money to ignore.
Sorry, Angus, do you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry, just in terms of the cost of buying straw or whatever you're going to bed them with, don't forget, traditionally we would every springtime hand out a fistful of money to buy fertilizer as well too. So we're essentially purchasing a different type of nutrient, as opposed to we're purchasing straw or hay or rushes or reeds or whatever. So we're purchasing that instead of purchasing organic or chemical fertilizer. So again, go back to my original thought process. There's an organic payment plus what I was spending on chemical fertilizer. And, in an ideal world, sure, you'd love to hold on to the whole lot of it. But the reality is, anyone that has to purchase straw probably would have been buying some straw anyway. And also they would have been probably buying chemical fertilizer as well. So, you know, it's in that's all in the equation there. But I really see the more straw, the more dung, the more slurry you have on farm, the more options you have for growing good crops of silage and for having good grazing platform as well too.
And it's Ivan, I suppose when we're talking about profitability and things in the dairy farm, it's a lot of it's linked to the output of the cow. And I know that I'd often get the comments thrown to me that sure, once you go organic, your yield is going to drop way back. And my answer often is, well, maybe if we don't tell the cow, she might know she's gone organic, she might milk away fine as she was. So what have you found in terms of going organic? Has there been any drop in terms of performance or the bulk tank? I know we've had a year effect.
Yeah, exactly. It's not really a fair year to compare, but only in that like everywhere, I feel the cows didn't peak where they would have typically. But I think that was just a reflection of the year. You know, there was that scarcity in grass when the grass growth really fell off there when it should have been peaking. They just didn't reach the highs that they would have. But we found here anyway they've held for longer. So I did like over the whole lactation, it's going to actually be pretty much on par. And we're averaging about 6,500 litres here on the per cow basis.
No major change. And Ivan, Elaine, any other questions?
Yeah, there's a question there specifically there for Angus from somebody, nutrition of the ewes pre and post lambing, and they're wondering your approach and what you're going to be feeding your ewes pre and post lambing. Is it going to be the same or different now that you are farming organically?
Yeah, it is going to be different. Post lambing, I've never fed any meal out in the fields. I just don't like that idea of going out with ewes and lambs and producing bags of meal and whatever. So I've never done that. So post lambing is going to be the same as it was. That'll focus around having as much grass possible at that time of the year. I have moved my lambing date back. I was lambing kind of second week in February. I'm now moving closer to the first week in March. So I have pulled it back to try and get that grazing platform a little bit better. And then pre-lambing, they will be moving on to catch crops, which I've sowed after the tillage crops on the organic ground. They're currently on good grass. They're actually the ewe lambs that are not going to the ram are grazing the red clover at the moment. And so post scanning the ewes, they'll probably get a couple of weeks on the cover crops and then into the shed. They'll be on I'll have to formulate a ration. I haven't figured it quite yet, but it'll be a combination of grass silage, red clover silage. I have some rolled organic wheat and I have some whole oats. So I have to try and formulate that best. I might end up in a scenario where I have to purchase some organic protein source just to top it up to the level that's required. But unfortunately, I haven't actually done my sums on it there completely. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe just John, sorry, did you want to say something there, Joe? No?
Yeah, there's just one question there for Angus, sorry, just before we go away. You mentioned red clover and someone has asked, you have to be careful grazing red clover with ewes. It affects fertility, basically. I've heard the question.
Sorry, just one other thing there, and it probably relates a little bit to the question to Ivan as well too. One thing I did notice this year with the cattle in particular and the ewes was they were much more content on the pastures. They mightn't have had as high a cover on the pasture, but they seemed to be much more content. They weren't looking to be moved. I would have been a high user of chemical fertilizer. And I'd often look at them and go, you know, when you go near the field, they'd be looking for a shift. And I'd often wonder, like, how the hell does everyone else manage? These girls have got plenty to eat here. this year I did notice a big difference, and they just seem more content. The question on the red clover, so the ewe lambs that are on it currently are not for breeding, and some of them I'm going to retain, and some of them will be going to the factory. They're actually finishing really, really well on it. I'm very impressed with it. The question of the embryo for pregnant cows and sheep is something that does keep cropping up on, and I keep getting mixed ideas around how many weeks after conception can you let them in on it. At the moment, I'm being cautious. I'm not putting the pregnant sheep in on it. That's it. I did towards the end of the summer. The cows, the drought was really hitting me bad here, and I had to buffer feed the cows, and I was feeding them red clover silage out in round feeders in the field, and they scanned up no problem. I was you know, I was a little bit concerned, but it was what I had at the time, and they scanned up no problem. I didn't see any embryo loss with the cows. So, but I'm no expert on it, but I'm just being cautious with the sheep anyway.
Okay, maybe, yeah, to John. John, in your video, you said that you're learning all the time and you're enjoying organics. So we've over 100 people here tonight, and a lot of them are thinking about organics. So what piece of advice or words of wisdom would you impart to them in relation to converting to organics? And I'm going to ask Angus and Ivan that same question, so you can be thinking of your answers as John gives us his.
I suppose if you can at all, visit farmers who are already in it. There's at this stage, there's enough of them round about the country. There's going to be neighbours here and there. Someone that's on a similar system, I would take, small steps. Don't go spending a pile of money in terms of, use the grants that are there, yes, but in terms of building new sheds, that look at converting older buildings. I did find year two a challenge in terms of the nutrient that was on the farm runoff. Probably should have been a little bit quicker on importing. I was bringing in dairy washings for agitation purposes, and that worked out fine. In hindsight, probably, as Angus had said there, about using his tanks to maybe take in slurry and concentrate more on using whatever legal nutrient you can bring in, or organic nutrient you can bring in. I was using pig slurry, for example. That had to stop. My farm is reasonably low in P. I will look at possibly using poultry, or poultry manure. If you need to cut back a little bit in year two, it's not the end of the world. Your farm does start to bounce back up again, rather than putting everything in jeopardy. But my lesson learned here certainly would have brought in nutrient quicker, in terms of now getting back to what Angus was saying there on using rushes, which has no real fertilizer value, versus straw, which is a very valid point. But I was using straw as well. I suppose it was a mix of, but that's something I hadn't really thought of, but that's quite valid. So I'll take that on board as well. But watch your stock numbers, keep your costs down, and bring your nutrient if you need it in quicker.
Okay, but it's all very doable from your point of view.
It is, and local. Look around local. Like even to get a couple of load of dairy washings there, to agitate a tank, and you'll get cover onto paddocks. You quite quickly with watery slurry, you get a good response. You're actively trying to get out your nutrient as soon as you cut your silage, because you need that to start the process going. And even with the red clover there, 6 weeks in a day. I cut again the second time, got a real nice crop.
Okay.
Just with slurry.
Okay, Angus, what's your take and words of advice?
I'd say do your homework. Every farm is different. Land type is different. Labor availability is different. Every farm is different. So do your homework. Make up your own mind on this. Go to farm walks, try and keep an open mind on it, because not everything that we're doing here tonight might suit other people. But there's usually a grain somewhere along the line that you'll pick up, which could be useful to yourself in what you're doing. Keep it simple. Start with the basics. And you could start right now in terms of availing of the soil testing scheme. So the number one nutrient you might require next spring could be something as simple as lime, and that would give you the kick you need for a very small cost. I'd say go in, if you're going into it, commit to it. Go in with an open mind. Back yourself, believe you can do it. It's not rocket science. If you pulled out an old farming book from 100 years ago, 200 years ago, you see a lot of stuff like cover crops and everything. It's all in there. It isn't new science. We probably have in the last 20, 30, 40 years been led by larger industry and into an era where we believed we had to put loads of inputs into our farming system. And it's created an expensive way of farming. And maybe there is a more simple way of doing it where we have much reduced variable costs. But I'd say back yourself, believe in yourself that it can be done. Don't go full revs on year 1 or 2. Don't be afraid to pull back your stocking rates a little bit just to give yourself room to maneuver. You're better in that year 1, I think, to be a little bit understocked rather than overstocked, wondering where am I going to go from here. And one thing I would say is, if you do get into a scenario where you do sell off a couple of cows, put that money to use. Don't let that money go into some kind of holiday fund or change the car or something like that. Put it to use on the farm and look at something different, something like a solar system for the farm that would generate income for the next 20 or 30 years. But look at all your assets as a whole and see, can you get a harmonious way of developing your farm, which doesn't involve more work on a daily basis for yourself. Because remember, as farmers, we are the most important thing on that farm. If we break down, everything else breaks down around us. So you have to look after yourself. But I'd say, honestly, just back yourself, go for it. It's not rocket science, and surround yourself with good, positive people.
Okay, Angus, thank you. And Ivan, what would you say to people?
Yeah, I suppose for us the big thing was, to have confidence that the grass would be, that the farm would be able to produce the grass to feed the cows basically, and that's been a journey we've been on for a number of years now, because our first 0N trial paddock would have been 5, maybe 6 years ago. So it's been an evolving kind of, a bit of a journey since then. So for my advice would be, depending on where you are along that line, whether you're far away from going organic or close, it's you can start somewhere, and I think just weaning off those chemical nitrogen and other inputs is so that's what will give you confidence, is seeing what the farm can do without those. But as the lad said, every farm is different, and you do have to do your homework and make sure it will work on your farm, and go see other farms, to engage with things like these webinars, and you'll have to find out everything that way.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, folks, that's very good, John, Angus, and Ivan. I think the words committed, open-mindedness, have a plan, all those kind of words are common to the three of you. But the three of you are smiling, so it definitely has had a positive influence of the three of you. So it's nice. So, Joe, have we any other questions? I think we've reached our time limit.
Yeah, no, I think you've covered them fairly well. There's plenty more, but unfortunately we won't have time to get through them all. So we got through a lot of them.
Well, on behalf of myself, Joe, and Martin in the background, I would like to thank you, John, Angus, and Ivan, for giving up their time and being very honest and frank with all the questions, and giving a very good overview and experience of organics as far as their systems are involved. And maybe just before we sign out, I just want to give a shout out for our next webinar, which is taking place on the 4th of Wednesday on the 4th of December at the same time. And that we're going to have joined by Emma Doyle, who is the Organic Sector Manager for Board BA, who will be giving us an update on their recent market developments and trends, research they have done in those areas. And also we're going to be joined by Anne Marr for the Urban Co-op in Limerick. And Anne is going to give us an overview of the workings and ethos behind very successful Urban Co-op there in Limerick. So on that note, everybody, remember, those of you thinking in organics, deadline 29th of November to get those applications into the certification body and to the Ag Food, those 2 steps that you have to do to enter organics. So with that note, take care, everybody, and stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.